This is a story of my grandfather's experiences in the United States Coast Guard. The 1960s was a time of war between the U.S. and a small country in Asia called Vietnam. In order to have enough U.S. soldiers to fight in the war, a draft was developed. All men aged 18 to 25 years old were eligible to be drafted into the military. Men who volunteered and enlisted into the military got to choose what branch of the service to join. Pop grew up in a small town in Dorchester County, Maryland, and has always had a love for water and boats. So as a young 18-year-old boy, Pop decided to enlist in the Coast Guard in November of 1966. Pop didn't really know what the Coast Guard did, but he knew that he had seen the boats around Ocean City. Pop assumed that he would be stationed or assigned to Ocean City or somewhere else in the United States. The Vietnam War began in 1954, so by the time Pop enlisted into the Coast Guard, the Vietnam War had been going on for over 10 years. He had been able to see footage from the terrible war on his little black and white TV at home, but being on the actual front lines had to be a totally different experience. The day Pop got the call that he'd be a member of the Coast Guard, they told him that he'd be stationed in San Francisco. But little did he know that 6 months later, he'd be in the war off the coast of Vietnam. Pop was placed on a U.S. Coast Guard cutter named the Taney. The Taney was a very large ship, 327 feet long. Soon the call came. The ship and crew were headed to Vietnam. All the men on board were shocked. It took 3 weeks to sail to Vietnam. The Taney's assignment was to patrol part of the South China Sea and watch out for Vietnamese manned boats trying to smuggle in goods. The Taney was also involved in sending medical support to the island. Occasionally, the Taney would get orders to provide support to the troops on shore and would aim their ship's guns at a particular area on land and fire until they were told to stop. Sometimes the enemy would shoot back at them, but nothing ever damaged the ship. Pop was a storekeeper on board the Taney. A storekeeper is someone that does payroll and coordinates and keeps track of supplies on board the ship. His main task was to collaborate with other ships at sea to get supplies like food and fuel for the Taney. Once the arrangements were made, the ships would anchor next to each other and sailors would attach a rope between the two ships and send the supplies over in a basket. The Taney was off the coast of Vietnam from April of 1969 to 1970. Pop wrote many letters to his fiancée, which is now my grandmother, while he was overseas and even had the opportunity to call her from a phone booth on certain islands. It was very expensive, about $10 per minute. Sometimes the sailors got to enjoy some time off called R&R, or rest and relaxation. Soldiers could go ashore to specific islands and explore the mainland. Pop visited Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Bangkok, and Singapore. Also, while docked for R&R time, the Taney would get painted and get repairs as needed. After returning from Vietnam, Pop was stationed for 3 more years on the Taney. When not at war, the ship did weather reports at sea, located airplanes that crashed in the water, drug interdictions, and search and rescue missions. Pop left the Coast Guard after 4 years and never expected to hear anything more about the Taney. He was very surprised to learn that after being decommissioned or taken out of service in 1986, it was going to be turned into a museum and placed very near to his hometown. Today, the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Taney is in the Baltimore Inner Harbor as a part of the Maritime Display. The Taney is named after Roger B. Taney, a former Secretary of Treasury that was from Maryland. Since the Taney has been in Baltimore, Pop and my grandmother have volunteered many hours on board, cleaning, painting, and helping to organize the museum displays. Pop even installed the air conditioning that's on board the ship today. My mom and Pop have organized several reunions of all the Taney veterans from the 50 years that it was in service, including Pop's Vietnam War crew. Pop is still friends with a few of his crewmates that he met on board the Taney and keeps up with some of them on Facebook. The Taney is a wonderful museum that the public can go on and see where sailors slept, ate, and their lockers, and the decks where many veterans have served their time in the war on board the Taney. Walking through the ship is like stepping into a part of history. One of the many things I will never forget Pop saying is, "The war gave me a new outlook on life and took me places that I would never have had the opportunity to visit if I did not join the U.S. Coast Guard."